I was rescheduled like a routine dental appointment to accommodate a ballet recital in a hall smelling of stale carpet. I walked the stage smiling, but staring at 3 empty chairs. I finally understood my place. I did not cry. I simply vanished. 5 years later, they found me. Not out of love, but because they desperately needed the one thing only I could destroy. My name is Olivia Flores, and standing in the middle of Killian Court, I felt less like a graduate and more like a ghost haunting her own funeral. The air in Cambridge was thick with the humidity of early June, a heavy blanket that trapped the scent of freshly cut grass, expensive perfume, and the nervous sweat of 3,000 overachievers. Around me, the world was vibrating. There was a constant, rolling roar of laughter and shouting, the frantic clicking of camera shutters, and the synthetic rustle of thousands of polyester gowns brushing against each other. It was a symphony of validation. Everyone here had someone screaming their name, everyone except me. I told myself I would not look. That was the agreement I had made with my dignity at 6 o'clock this morning while I was pinning my cap into place in the mirror of my dorm room. I had looked at my reflection, at the dark circles under my eyes that 4 years of sleep deprivation had carved there, and I had whispered the command aloud. Do not look at the stands. Do not look for them. You know the probability. You know the variables. Do not run the calculation again because the result is always the same. But habits are harder to break than bones. My eyes drifted upward, defying my logic, scanning the crowded bleachers until they locked onto the coordinate I had fiercely protected for weeks. Row 12, Section B, 3 seats. I had fought for those tickets. At MIT, graduation tickets are a currency more valuable than Bitcoin. People bartered, begged, and traded favors for months just to get one extra seat for a grandmother or a cousin. I had 3, and right now, they were the only empty spaces in a sea of humanity. They looked like missing teeth in a perfect smile. A woman in a floral dress 2 rows down had asked me earlier if she could have them. She had family standing by the fence, straining to see. I had told her no. I had told her my family was coming. I had lied with a straight face, clinging to a statistical impossibility because the alternative was admitting that I was an orphan with living parents. Olivia Flores, the voice of the dean boomed through the speakers, distorted slightly by the echo. It was my cue. I moved on autopilot. This was just another lab procedure. Step 1, ascend the stairs. Step 2, cross the platform. Step 3, accept the diploma. Step 4, do not vomit. I walked across the stage. The wood felt firm under my heels. I could feel the heat of the stage lights on my skin, bright and blinding. I turned my head to the audience, and I executed the smile I had been practicing in the bathroom mirror for a week. It was a mechanical contraction of the zygomatic major muscles. It reached my eyes, or at least, I hoped it did. It was the smile of a winner. It was the smile of a girl who had survived thermodynamics and fluid mechanics and the crushing weight of imposter syndrome. It was a lie. I scanned the blur of faces, looking for a hand wave, a flash of red from my mother's favorite scarf, the glint of my father's glasses. I looked for Noah. I looked for anyone who shared my blood. Nothing, just the polite, scattered applause of strangers who were waiting for their own children to be called. I took the diploma. I shook the hand of the president. I walked off the stage. And just like that, it was over. 4 years of blood, sweat, and caffeine, boiled down to 15 seconds of silence. As I descended the stairs, my mind violently cut away from the sunshine and the prestige of Cambridge. I was suddenly transported 300 miles away, to a place I knew too well. I could see it as clearly as if I were standing there, the community center auditorium in our hometown. It would smell of old, damp carpeting and hairspray. The air conditioning always rattled there, a low hum that you had to shout over. The lighting was never right, always too yellow, making everyone look slightly jaundiced. That was where they were. They were sitting on folding metal chairs that clanged when you shifted your weight. My mother, Diane, would be leaning forward, her phone raised high, recording every breath my sister took. My father, Mark, would be holding a bouquet of supermarket roses. his face soft with a pride he never showed me. And Brielle would be on stage, my little sister, the ballerina. She would be wearing a tutu that cost more than my textbooks, spinning in circles, receiving the adoration that I had to cross a state line to find and still came up empty-handed. I found my seat among the other graduates. The ceremony dragged on, but I was numb. I felt like I was encased in glass. Around me, my classmates were weeping, hugging, throwing their caps in the air. A guy named David, who I had tutored in calculus during our sophomore year, grabbed my shoulders and shook me, screaming that we were free. I just nodded. I felt nothing. The emotional center of my brain had shut down to prevent a catastrophic system failure. When the ceremony finally ended, the chaos began. The orderly rows of graduates dissolved into a mosh pit of families. It was a collision of joy. Fathers were lifting daughters into the air. Mothers were crying into the shoulders of sons who looked embarrassed but happy. There were balloons, flowers, signs with glitter glue. I stood alone near a stone pillar, clutching my diploma case. I looked like a lost child waiting for a parent to pick them up from school. I pulled my phone out of the hidden pocket of my gown. I told myself I was just checking the time. It was 1 p.m. There was a notification, a text message from Mom. My heart hammered against my ribs, a foolish biological reaction. Hope is a parasite. It burrows in deep and feeds on your logic until there is nothing left. I unlocked the screen. Recital rescheduled. You will understand. Brielle was radiant. I stared at the words. I read them once. I read them twice. I analyzed the syntax. Recital rescheduled. Passive voice. No agent. As if the universe itself had moved the time, and they were merely helpless victims of fate. You will understand. Not a question. A command. A presumption. I was the strong one. I was the smart one. I was the one who understood things like schedules and logistics and sacrifice. And then, a second text bubbled up, a casual afterthought thrown into the digital void. How was your ceremony? Was it fun? Fun? She asked if my graduation from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology was fun. She referred to the culmination of my life's work, the sleepless nights, the hunger, the anxiety, the triumph of intellect, as a ceremony, like it was a birthday party, like it was a trip to the zoo. I lowered the phone. The sounds of the courtyard seemed to mute, turning into a dull roar like being underwater. I looked at the families around me. I saw a father adjusting his son's tie, his eyes wet with tears. I saw a mother kissing her daughter's forehead, whispering words I couldn't hear but could feel. They were present. They were here. They had flown on planes, driven cars, taken time off work, booked hotels. They had shown up. My parents had not been hit by a car. They had not been detained by an emergency. They had simply checked their calendar, saw a conflict, and made a choice. They weighed my graduation against my sister's recital. They put the two events on a scale, and I lost. I didn't lose by a narrow margin. I wasn't a close second. I was a non-factor. I was the dental appointment you reschedule because something more fun came up. I was the oil change you put off because the car is running fine. And why fix what isn't broken? You will understand. She had written. And the terrifying thing was, I did understand. For the first time in 22 years. I understood perfectly. I wasn't angry. That was the surprise. I expected rage. I expected to want to scream, to throw my phone against the stone pillar, to call them and demand an explanation, but the anger didn't come. Instead, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. It was the feeling of solving a complex equation that had stumped you for years. The variables finally clicked into place. They didn't hate me. Hate requires effort. Hate requires passion. This was worse. This was indifference. This was the casual neglect you show to a sturdy houseplant. You water it when you remember, but mostly you assume it will survive on its own because it always has. I was the sturdy plant. I was the low-maintenance asset. I was the good daughter who didn't need clapping for. But even a cactus dies if you leave it in the dark long enough. I looked down at the 3 empty chairs in row 12. Section B. They were still empty. People were walking past them, ignoring them. They were just metal and plastic. They weren't a tragedy. They were just furniture. I unlocked my phone again. My thumb hovered over the contact labeled Mom. I could reply. I could write a paragraph about how much this hurt. I could guilt them. I could send a picture of me standing alone. I could beg for an apology. But what is the return on investment for begging zero? If I argued, I was still engaging. If I cried, I was still their daughter seeking approval. If I fought, I was still playing the game. The only way to win a rigged game is to knock over the board. I opened the contact settings. My finger was steady. I didn't shake. I felt like a surgeon making a necessary amputation. The limb is gangrenous. It has to go to save the body. I scrolled down to the bottom of the screen. The red text glared at me. Block this caller. I tapped it. A confirmation box popped up. You will not receive phone calls, messages, or FaceTime from people on the block list. I didn't hesitate. Confirm. I went to Dad. Block this caller. Confirm. I went to Brielle. My thumb paused for a fraction of a second. She was just a girl. She was dancing. It wasn't her fault the sun revolved around her. But she was part of the system. She was the gravity that pulled everything away from me. If I kept the door open for her, they would slip through the cracks. Block this caller. Confirm. I went to the family group chat, the one where they shared photos of dinner and inside jokes I wasn't part of. Leave conversation. Confirm. Delete conversation. Confirm. The screen was clean. The threads were gone. I looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant, painful blue. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the humid air of Cambridge. For the first time all day, I didn't feel the phantom weight of the 3 empty chairs. I didn't feel the need to look at the stands. I was alone. Technically, physically, socially. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. I put the phone back in my pocket. I adjusted my cap. I turned my back on the empty seats, on the ghost of the family I had tried to invent, and I walked toward the exit. I didn't know where I was going to sleep tonight. I didn't know where I would be in 5 years, but I knew one thing. Today was the first time I chose myself. To understand why I walked away from my own graduation without turning back, you have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. It was a beautiful house. If you drove past it on a Sunday afternoon, you would see a manicured lawn that was the envy of the homeowners association. The shutters were painted a tasteful slate blue, the porch was swept clean, and in the autumn, there were pumpkins arranged by size on the steps. It was the kind of house that whispered of stability and middle-class American success. It was a lie built of brick and siding. Inside, the hallway that led from the foyer to the kitchen was what my mother liked to call our family timeline. It was a gallery of framed photographs, dozens of them, capturing the history of the Caldwell family. But if a stranger were to walk down that hall, they would assume my parents had only one child. There was Brielle in her first tutu, an explosion of pink tulle, beaming at the camera with missing front teeth. There was Brielle holding a bouquet of roses after her performance in the Nutcracker. There was Brielle in mid-leap, her legs extended in a perfect split, suspended in the air like a bird. There was Brielle being hugged by my father, Brielle being kissed by my mother, Brielle blowing out candles. I was there, technically, but you had to hunt for me. I was a background texture. I was the blur of a shoulder in the corner of the frame. I was the top of a head in the bottom left, obscured by the watermark of the photographer. In the few family portraits where we were all present, the composition was always the same. My parents stood in the center, their hands resting protectively on Brielle's shoulders, angling their bodies toward her as if she were a source of heat. I was always on the periphery, standing a few inches apart, my hands clasped in front of me, smiling a smile that didn't quite fit my face. I looked less like a daughter and more like a visiting cousin who had wandered into the frame by accident. I learned the physics of this household gravity when I was 12 years old. It was a Tuesday in November. I woke up with that specific, vibrating energy that every child feels on their birthday. I dressed carefully for school. I went downstairs to the kitchen, expecting the smell of pancakes, or at least a card propped up against the cereal box. The kitchen was chaotic. My mother was rushing around, shoving a leotard into a duffel bag. My father was on the phone, looking at his watch. Brielle was sitting at the island, crying because she couldn't find her left jazz shoe. "Morning," I said. My voice was small. "Have you seen the shoe?" my mother asked without looking at me. "Olivia, don't just stand there. Look under the sofa." I got on my hands and knees. I found the shoe. I handed it to Brielle, who snatched it without a word. "We have to go," my mother said, grabbing her keys. "Dad, are you coming? The audition starts in 40 minutes. "I'll meet you there," my father said. He kissed Brielle on the top of her head. "Knock 'em dead, sweetheart." They started moving toward the garage. The door was opening. The cold air was rushing in. They were leaving. "It's my birthday," I said. I didn't shout it. I said it with a flat, factual tone, like I was stating the temperature. My mother stopped. She turned around, her hand still on the doorknob. She looked at me, and for a second, her face went blank. Then, a flicker of annoyance crossed her features. It wasn't guilt. It was irritation. It was the look you give a traffic light that turns red when you are late. "Oh," she said. "Is that today?" She looked at the calendar on the wall, then back at me. "Well, look, Liv," she said, her voice tight. "We are in a crisis mode here. This audition is for the state showcase. We can't do the cake thing tonight. We'll do it on the weekend. Okay, we'll combine it with pizza night." "Okay," I said. "Don't look so tragic," she added, the edge in her voice sharpening. "You're 12. You're not a baby. You know how important this is for your sister." She closed the door. The lock clicked. The house fell silent. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. There was no cake on the weekend. The weekend came and went, consumed by rehearsals and costume fittings. By Monday, the moment had passed, and bringing it up would have made me seem petty. I learned a vital lesson that Tuesday in my house. Needs were a finite resource, and my sister required 100% of the supply. My father had a different way of enforcing the hierarchy. He didn't use annoyance. He used a twisted form of praise. When I was 16, I needed a ride to the regional science fair. I had built a water filtration system that had actually won a small grant. I needed to get the display board, which was 3 feet by 4 feet, to the high school gym by 5 o'clock. "I can't take you," my father said. He was sitting in his recliner, reading the paper. "Brielle has her physical therapy. Her ankle is acting up. But Mom is taking her," I argued. "The car is free. You're here." He lowered the paper and looked at me over his reading glasses. He gave me a look of deep, weary respect. "Liv," he said, "you're strong. Look at you. You figured out how to filter lead out of water. You can figure out how to get to the school. Your sister, she's fragile. She needs support. You don't need us for the small things because you're capable. That's a compliment, honey." I carried the display board 2 miles. It was windy. The cardboard acted like a sail, dragging me toward the ditch every time a truck drove past. I arrived sweating, my hands cut by the paper edges, my nice blouse ruined. I won 2nd place. My parents weren't there to see the ribbon. They were icing an ankle that wasn't broken. "You're strong." It became the mantra of my existence. It was the phrase they used to absolve themselves of guilt. If I was strong, then their neglect wasn't abandonment. It was trust. They weren't ignoring me. They were empowering me. It was a brilliant rhetorical strategy. It turned my loneliness into a badge of honor that I was forced to wear. So, I tried to be the daughter they wanted. I tried to be so good, so low maintenance, that they would have extra energy left over for me. I became the easy child. I took over the cooking when I was 14 because my mother was always too tired after driving Brielle to the studio. I learned to make lasagna, roasted chicken, and vegetable stir-fry. I did the laundry. I folded Brielle's tights and leotards, washing them on the delicate cycle so they wouldn't snag. I tutored Brielle in math because if her grades dropped, she wouldn't be allowed to dance. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, explaining algebra to her while she messaged her friends, saving her academic life so she could continue to be the star. I brought home report cards that were boring in their perfection. Straight A's, honor society, advanced placement, everything. I laid these offerings on the kitchen counter like sacrifices on an altar. My mother would sign them without reading the comments. Good job, Liv. Put it in the folder. That was it. No celebratory dinner, no cash reward. Just put it in the folder. Because excellence was my baseline. It was expected. Brielle getting a C+ on a history quiz was a cause for a family meeting and a celebratory ice cream run because she tried so hard. Me getting the highest score in the district was just Olivia being Olivia. The final fracture happened during my senior year of high school. The winter was brutal that year. The wind chill was consistently 20 degrees below zero. I had been saving for a car since I was 15, babysitting and tutoring, but my savings account was growing painfully slowly. I needed a vehicle to get to my internship at the local lab, which was the ticket to my college applications. On Christmas morning, we walked out to the driveway. There was a car there, a brand new, pearl white sedan with a giant red bow on the hood. It wasn't a luxury sports car, but it was new, safe, and beautiful. My heart stopped. For one foolish, delirious second, I thought it was for me. I was the one with the job. I was the one driving to the internship. I was the one who had been asking for help with transportation. Merry Christmas, Brielle, my father shouted. Brielle squealed. She actually squealed. A high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. She ran to the car. She didn't even have her full license yet. She only had a learner's permit. We wanted you to be safe driving to rehearsals, my mother said, wiping a tear from her eye. We couldn't bear the thought of you in some old clunker. I stood there in my pajamas, the cold seeping through my slippers. What about me? I asked. My father turned, looking surprised that I was still there. You take the bus. Liv, it goes right by the lab. It's very convenient. The bus takes an hour and a half, I said. And I have to wait 20 minutes in the cold at the transfer station. It builds character, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Besides, we couldn't afford 2 cars. You understand, Brielle's schedule is much more demanding. For the rest of that winter, I stood at the bus stop in the gray pre-dawn light. I watched my sister drive past in her heated car, the windows defrosted, the radio playing. She never offered me a ride. She said it was out of her way. I sat on the plastic seat of the bus, surrounded by strangers, smelling wet wool and exhaust fumes, and I realized that in my house, love was weighed on a scale. And I didn't weigh enough to tip it, but there were other signs, smaller ones, that I missed because I was too busy looking at the big picture. My father had a strange relationship with the mail. He would intercept the postman. If any envelope looked like it came from a bank or a credit card company, he would whisk it away into his office. Junk mail, he would say. Scams, I handle it so you girls don't have to worry. And my mother, she had a fixation on documents. When I turned 18, I asked for my social security card and birth certificate. I needed them for a job application. Oh, no, she had said, clutching her chest as if I had asked to carry a loaded gun. I keep those in the fireproof box. You'll lose them. You're brilliant. Liv, but you're absent-minded. I'll hold on to them. If you need a copy, just ask me, and I'll get it for you. But they are my documents, I had said. And I am your mother, she replied, her voice dropping to that steel tone she used when questioned. I am protecting you. Why do you always have to make everything a fight? Just let me take care of the paperwork. You focus on your little science projects. I let her keep them. I thought it was just her controlling nature. I thought it was just another way for her to feel useful, to keep me tethered to the house. I thought she wanted to be the gatekeeper of my identity because she couldn't stand the thought of me being fully independent. I was wrong. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about love. It was about access. I was the strong one, the capable one, the one who didn't need anything, and because I didn't need anything, they decided I was the perfect resource to strip for parts. They looked at my future, my potential, my good credit score that I hadn't even built yet, and they didn't see a daughter's success. They saw a line of credit. They saw a way to pay for the tutus, the lessons, the gas for the white sedan, and the endless, bottomless hunger of the golden child. I stood at that bus stop, shivering, telling myself I was tough. I told myself I was independent, but looking back, I realize I wasn't independent. I was just prey that hadn't realized it was being hunted. I was being groomed, not for success, but for sacrifice. Back in my dorm room, the silence was heavy, like water filling a lung. I took off the graduation gown. I did not fold it. I did not smooth out the wrinkles or place it in a keepsake box with lavender sachets. I hung it on the back of the door, where it draped like the shed skin of a reptile. It looked hollow. It looked like a dead thing. My roommate was gone, already celebrating at a lunch with parents who had flown in from Ohio. The room was just me and the dust motes dancing in the shaft of afternoon light. I sat on the edge of my bed. My phone sat on the desk, face up. The screen was black. In any other version of this story, this is the part where the daughter breaks. She sends the angry text. She sends the photo of her diploma with a sarcastic caption. She calls and screams until her voice gives out, demanding to be seen, demanding to know why she wasn't enough. I did none of those things. I picked up the phone. I did not open the camera app. There would be no photos of me in the cap and gown sent to the family group chat. There would be no visual proof that I had achieved what they said I could not. If they wanted to see me, they could have driven 3 hours. If they wanted to see the degree, they could wait until I was famous enough for them to read about it in a magazine. I opened the settings menu. The blocking process was mechanical. It was just data management. I started with my mother. I tapped the icon next to her name. Block this caller. The phone asked for confirmation. I gave it. The line to Diane Caldwell was severed. No more guilt trips about missed holidays. No more requests for tech support. No more passive-aggressive updates about Brielle's ankle. Next was my father, Mark Caldwell. Block this caller. Done. The silence from him would be no different than the noise he usually made, which was just the echo of my mother's demands anyway. Then came the email addresses. I set up a filter. Any incoming mail from their domain was to be routed directly to the trash. Unread. I did not want to see the subject lines. I did not want to see the "we were just worried" or the "you are overreacting" headers. I wanted a clean slate. Finally, the group chat. Caldwell Crazy Crew. The name itself made me nauseous. I selected the option to leave the group. Then I deleted the thread. The history of my family. The birthday wishes that arrived a day late, the photos of vacations I wasn't invited to vanished. It was done. The room did not shake. The sky did not darken. I just sat there, and for the first time in my life, the static in my head stopped. It was a terrifying, pristine silence. It was the sound of a lifeline being cut, but also the sound of a noose being loosened. I breathed in. I breathed out. The air tasted thinner, sharper. I spent the next 2 weeks packing. I did not go home for the summer. I did not go back to the house with the perfectly manicured lawn and the hallway of Brielle's photos. I sold everything I could not carry, my textbooks, my winter coat, the mini fridge. I took the money, which amounted to $450, and added it to the savings I had scraped together from my lab stipend. I moved to Seattle. I chose Seattle because it was gray. I chose it because it was far away. I chose it because it was a city of engineers and ghosts, a place where people came to work and disappear into the rain. I found a studio apartment in a neighborhood that was just on the edge of being gentrified. It was small. The radiator clanked, and the view was of a brick wall. But the lease had my name on it, just my name. I started at Redwood Kinetics Lab 3 weeks after graduation. The lab was a fortress of glass and steel. Nestled in the tech district, it smelled of ozone, filtered air, and expensive coffee. This was not a place for drama. This was a place for results. My job was in the prosthetics division. We were designing neural interfaces for artificial limbs. It was precise, demanding work. You could not charm your way through a circuit board design. You could not cry your way into a functioning algorithm. The code either worked or it failed. For the first time in my life, I was evaluated solely on my output. My supervisor, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, was a terrifying figure in the industry. She had eyes that looked like they could scan you for bone density issues just by glancing at you. On my second day, I presented a preliminary report on signal latency. I stood at the front of the conference room, my hands shaking slightly. I expected the usual dismissal. I expected to be interrupted. Dr. Thorne listened. She read the data. She looked up at me. "This is solid work, Flores," she said. "The methodology in Section 4 is elegant. Good catch on the noise reduction." She didn't add, "for a girl." She didn't add, "but your sister is more graceful." She didn't say, "You're strong so you don't need praise." She just said it was good work. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror for 5 minutes, just to make sure I hadn't hallucinated the interaction. I made friends. Or rather, I made allies. There was Tessa Wynn. She was a bioengineer who sat 2 desks down from me. She had pink hair and a laugh that sounded like a car engine turning over. One afternoon, about 2 months in, we were in the break room. I was staring at the coffee machine, lost in thought. The date was approaching my mother's birthday. The muscle memory of obligation was twitching in my brain. I should send a card. I should call. Then I remembered the block. The wall was up. "Hey," Tessa said. I jumped. "You went somewhere else for a second," she said, leaning against the counter. "You okay?" I braced myself. This was the moment where I usually had to explain. "I'm fine. Just family stuff. My sister has a thing. My parents are busy. I prepared the script." "I'm fine," I said automatically. Tessa looked at me. She didn't press. She didn't ask if I was sure. She didn't compare my mood to anyone else's. "Okay," she said. "Well, if you want to bail on the simulation run tonight and get tacos instead, I'm in. The new place down the street does a $3 carnitas that will change your life." She didn't want anything from me. She didn't need me to fix her computer or listen to her vent about a crisis. She just wanted tacos. "Tacos sound good," I said, and I meant it. But the silence I had created wasn't just peace, it was also a vacuum. And vacuums have a way of sucking things in. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Evans. Her office was beige and smelled of vanilla candles, which I usually hated, but I tolerated it because she was the first person who let me finish a sentence without interrupting. I paid her $150 an hour to dissect the corpse of my childhood. "I feel guilty," I told her in our 4th session. "I cut them off. I'm the bad guy. I'm the one who walked away." "Did you walk away?" Dr. Evans asked. She adjusted her glasses. "Or did you just stop chasing a car that was driving away from you?" "They're my parents," I said. "They fed me. They housed me." "That is the legal minimum requirement for avoiding jail," she said dryly. "Olivia, what you experienced has a name. It's called systematic neglect. It's called parentification. You were raised to be a utility, not a person. You were a support beam in a house built for someone else." Hearing it gave it shape. It wasn't just me being sensitive. It was a pathology. It was a diagnosis. I left that session feeling raw, but lighter. I walked through the rain in downtown Seattle, watching the water run into the gutters. I was 23 years old. I had a job. I had a friend who liked tacos. I had a therapist. I was building a life. It was a small life, but it was mine. Then came the promotion. 6 months into my time at Redwood, Dr. Thorne called me into her office. "We're bidding for a military contract," she said, not looking up from her screens. "Next generation exosuits, high clearance. I want you on the lead team for the neural link." My stomach did a flip. This was it. This was the career-making moment. "I'd be honored," I said. "It's not about honor, it's about competence," she said. "HR needs to run a deep background check, standard procedure for government contracts. Financials, criminal, the works. Just sign the consent forms and get them to Caleb in legal by noon." I signed the papers without a second thought. I had nothing to hide. I had never been arrested. I had never even had a speeding ticket. My financial life was boringly prudent. I paid my student loans on time. I paid my rent early. 3 days later, I was called into the legal department. Caleb Ortiz was a sharp-looking guy with a kind face, but today he looked uncomfortable. He had a file open on his desk. He gestured for me to sit. "Olivia," he said, "is there something you want to tell us?" "I don't understand," I said. "Is there a problem with the background check?" "We ran your credit report," Caleb said. He turned his monitor so I could see it. "The government requires a certain level of financial stability for this clearance level. They flag high debt-to-income ratios as a security risk, leverage for blackmail, that sort of thing." "I have student loans," I said, confused. "But I'm paying them. It's about $30,000. That's standard." "It's not the student loans," Caleb said gently. He pointed to a line on the screen. There, glowing in red pixels, was a number that made the blood drain from my face. Outstanding debt. $78,422. I stared at it. The number made no sense. It was impossible. "That's a mistake," I said. My voice sounded thin. "I don't have a credit card with that limit. I don't have a car loan. I rent a studio apartment. It's listed as a defaulted personal loan and 2 maxed-out credit lines," Caleb said. "Opened 2 years ago. The address on file." He hesitated. "What is the address?" I asked. The cold feeling from the graduation ceremony was back, creeping up my spine. "It's listed as a residential address in Illinois," he said. He read out the street name. I stopped breathing. It was the house with the manicured lawn. It was the house with the slate blue shutters. "That's my parents' house," I whispered. "The accounts are in your name, Olivia," Caleb said. "Your social security number. Your signature is on the digital promissory note." I looked at the screen again. The date the accounts were opened coincided with the fall of my junior year. The year Brielle had gotten into that prestigious, out-of-state summer intensive program. The one that cost a fortune. The one my parents said they had figured out how to pay for. They hadn't figured it out. They had just found a new source of funding. Me. I felt the room tilt. I had blocked their numbers. I had blocked their emails. I had moved 2,000 miles away to escape the gravity of their selfishness. But they had reached out across the distance, across the silence, and they had already stolen from me before I even left. "I didn't open these," I said. I looked Caleb in the eye. "I did not open these accounts." "If that's true," Caleb said, his voice serious, "then we are looking at identity theft, and since the address is your parents', that makes it federal fraud committed by family." I sat back in the chair. The silence I had cultivated for 6 months shattered. It wasn't replaced by noise. It was replaced by the sound of a war drum. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "You need to dispute it," Caleb said. "But Olivia, to clear this up for your security clearance, you're going to have to file a police report. You're going to have to prosecute." I looked at the red number on the screen. $78,000. They had skipped my graduation. That hurt my heart. This was trying to ruin my life. I thought about the 3 empty chairs. I thought about the text message you will understand. "Print it out," I said to Caleb. "Print it all out." The weeks following the discovery of the debt were a strange study in duality. On one side of the glass, I was Olivia Flores, rising star of Redwood Kinetics, a woman constructing a life of enviable precision and autonomy. On the other side, I was a crime scene investigator picking through the wreckage of my own identity, armed with a highlighter and a growing stack of affidavits. Work became my sanctuary. Dr. Thorne did not just keep me on the exosuit project. She promoted me. She gave me a small team of 3 junior engineers to manage. It was a test of leadership, and I approached it with a philosophy that was the exact inverse of my parents' parenting style. I didn't pit them against each other. I didn't ignore the quiet one in the corner. When a young coder named Ben made a calculation error that cost us 2 days of simulation time, I didn't sigh and tell him he should be more like his peers. I sat down with him. We traced the error. We fixed the code. "You handled that with a lot of grace," Ben told me later, looking relieved. My last boss would have flayed me. Panic doesn't write code, I told him, and neither does shame. I was leading with the calm I had been forced to cultivate in the chaos of my childhood, but now I was using it to build people up, not just to survive them. It paid off. 2 months after the background check nightmare began, my team cracked the latency issue on the neural link. We filed for a patent. When the provisional patent plaque arrived, it was heavy. It was a rectangle of brushed steel and glass, etched with diagrams and names. My name was at the top. Olivia Flores, not Brielle's sister, not the other daughter, just me. I held it in my hands for a long time. There was no applause, no bouquet of roses, no audience, but the satisfaction that settled in my chest was dense and real. It felt like eating a meal after years of snacking on crumbs. Tessa Wynn made sure I didn't turn into a robot during this time. She sensed the tension radiating off me the hours I spent on the phone with Caleb, the dark circles that reappeared under my eyes, and she appointed herself my personal wellness coordinator. "You are coming with me," she announced one Tuesday at 5 o'clock. "And do not say you have data to review." She took me to a bouldering gym. It was a cavernous space filled with jagged artificial walls and the smell of chalk and sweat. "Climbing is problem-solving with your body," Tessa said, tossing me a bag of chalk. "You can't think about your credit score when you're hanging by 3 fingers from a plastic ledge." She was right. For 2 hours, my world narrowed down to the next hold, the next grip, the burn in my forearms. When I fell, the mat caught me. When I reached the top, Tessa cheered not a polite golf clap, but a raucous, genuine shout that echoed off the ceiling. Afterward, we sat on the mats, drinking electrolytes. "You're getting stronger," Tessa said, bumping my shoulder with hers. "I have to be," I said. She looked at me, her expression stripping away the banter. "You know you don't have to carry the whole mountain, right? You can just climb it." She didn't know the specifics of the fraud. I was too ashamed to tell her the full extent yet, but she knew I was fighting a war, and she stayed in the foxhole with me, passing me ammunition in the form of protein bars and bad jokes. With the bonus from the patent filing and my savings, I made a decision. I stopped renting. I bought a condo. It was small, just 800 square feet in a refurbished industrial building. It had exposed brick and large windows that looked out over the rainy Seattle skyline. It wasn't a suburban house with a porch. It was better. It was a fortress. The first night I spent there, the boxes were still unpacked. I opened one marked Decor. Inside was a framed photo Tessa had taken of me at the lab. In the picture, I was wearing safety goggles, holding a prototype, and laughing at something off camera. I looked vibrant. I looked present. In my parents' house, my photos were fillers. They were small 4x6 prints tucked into the corners of frames dominated by Brielle's 8x10 portraits. I took a hammer and a nail. I walked to the center of the largest wall in the living room. I didn't measure to see if it was centered. I didn't ask for permission. I drove the nail into the drywall and hung the photo. I stood back. It was the only thing on the wall, a shrine to a life that belonged entirely to me. But the past is not a light switch you can simply flick off. It is a ghost that walks through walls. It hit me on a Sunday morning in a coffee shop. I was waiting for a latte when the playlist shifted. A classical piece began to play Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers. The smell of coffee vanished. Suddenly, I smelled hairspray and stale dust. I was 6 years old, sitting on a hard floor, waiting for Brielle to finish her variation. I felt the old sensation of invisibility, the knowledge that I was merely a prop in someone else's scene. My heart began to race, my hands clammy, a panic attack, sharp and sudden, clawed at my throat. I closed my eyes. I am in Seattle. I recited in my head. I am 23. I own a condo. I have a patent. I am not waiting for them. I breathed in for 4 counts. I held it for 7. I exhaled for 8. The technique Dr. Evans had taught me. Slowly, the music just became music again. The smell of coffee returned. I took my cup, tipped the barista, and walked out. I didn't run. I just walked. I had learned that healing isn't about never hurting. It's about not letting the hurt drive the car. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I hadn't blocked, though I never saved it. Noah Vance, my cousin. Hey Liv, just thinking about you. Hope you're safe. Uncle Mark as well. He's Mark, but I miss you. I stared at the screen. Noah was the Switzerland of the family. He wasn't malicious, just passive. He had watched me be sidelined for years and had offered only sympathetic glances. Never intervention. I didn't reply. I didn't want to give them a window into my world. Not even a crack. But I didn't block him either. I left the message on read. It was a small act of power. I was the one deciding the terms of engagement now. The next morning, the reality of the war arrived in a manila envelope on Caleb's desk. We got the full file from the lender, Caleb said. He looked grim. The playful mood from the gym was gone. I sat down. The office door was closed. Tell me, I said. We dug deep into the metadata and the original application documents, Caleb said. It wasn't an identity theft by a stranger. Olivia, we knew that. But this confirms it legally. He slid a paper across the desk. It was a copy of the loan application for $40,000, dated 2 years ago. Look at the signature, he said. I looked. At the bottom of the page, in blue ink, was my name, Olivia Flores. It wasn't a shaky forgery. It wasn't a blocky attempt to copy my style. It was my signature, the loop of the O, the sharp strike of the F, the way the S trailed off. It was the signature I had developed in high school. It looks real, I whispered. A chill went through me. How did they do this? Did you ever sign any blank documents for them? Caleb asked. Maybe for school trips or medical forms. I thought back. The memory surfaced, clear and bitter. My mother, the keeper of documents. I'll hold on to your papers. Liv, you're absent-minded. When I turned 18, I said, my voice steadying into a cold rage. She made me sign a bunch of forms. She said they were for updating my status with the insurance company and the family trust. I didn't read them. I just signed where she pointed. Caleb nodded. And the social security number is valid. The credit history was linked perfectly. From the bank's perspective, this is a legitimate debt incurred by you. They have your signature, your ID numbers, and the funds were deposited into an account that had your name on it jointly with your mother. He tapped the paper. This is good news and bad news, he said. The bad news is, it's harder to prove fraud when the signature is a match. The bank will say you authorized it. And the good news, I asked. The good news is that we can trace the IP address of the digital submission and the withdrawal history. Caleb said, the money didn't go to you. It went to a vendor called Elite Point Academy and a travel agency specializing in European tours. Brielle's summer intensive in Paris, I said. That's what this bought. I looked at the signature again, that loop of the O. My mother had sat at the kitchen table, watched me sign my name, and known exactly what she was going to use it for. She hadn't just stolen my money, she had weaponized my trust. Do we have enough to file? I asked. We have enough to start a war, Caleb said. But once we file this dispute, Olivia, the bank goes after the cosigner or the person who committed the fraud. They will open a criminal investigation. He looked at me. Are you ready for them to know you know? I thought about the 3 empty chairs. I thought about the text asking if my graduation was fun. I thought about the patent hanging on my wall in the condo that I paid for with my own sweat. They didn't mind destroying my credit to pay for a dance class, I said. I don't mind destroying their narrative to get my life back. I pushed the paper back to him. File it, Caleb, file it all. The conference room in the legal department had become my second home. It was a sterile aquarium of glass and polished mahogany, a place where emotions went to die and facts came to be dissected. Caleb Ortiz sat across from me, surrounded by stacks of paper that represented the autopsy of my financial identity. We got the transaction logs from the lender, Caleb said. He slid a thick binder across the table. And Olivia, it is not subtle. I opened the binder. I expected to see a blur of numbers, generic cash withdrawals, maybe transfers to a hidden account. I did not expect a shopping list for a princess. The $78,000 was not a single lump sum. It was a narrative of indulgence told in charges of $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 at a time. "Look at page 4, Caleb said, clicking his pen. I turned the page. My finger traced the line items. June 15th, $5,400. Vendor Elite Point Academy via Euro Travel Partners. June 15th, that was 3 days after my graduation. 3 days after I walked across the stage at MIT and looked at 3 empty chairs, while I was packing my life into cardboard boxes and selling my mini fridge to buy a bus ticket to Seattle. My mother was using my social security number to book a flight to Paris. It continues, Caleb said softly. Page 6, July 2nd, $2,100. Vendor Madame Dubois Custom Costumery. A costume. They spent $2,000 on a costume. I remembered the winter I walked to the bus stop because they couldn't afford a second car. I remembered the cold wind cutting through my coat. They hadn't been broke. They were just saving their credit for Brielle and using mine for the overflow. The dates aligned perfectly with Brielle's European tour. I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were cold. Every single charge corresponds to her schedule. The flights, the hotels, the master classes. It gets worse, Caleb said. He pulled up a laptop screen and turned it toward me. We traced the email address used to verify the account. You said you blocked their emails, right? Yes, I said. Whatever account they used, I wouldn't have seen the confirmation. They didn't use their primary email, Caleb explained. They used an old one, caldwellfamilyadmin@provider.com. Remember that one? I felt a jolt of recognition. It was the shared email address my mother had set up when I was in high school to manage household logistics. She had the password. I had never logged into it since I was 17. They reactivated it, Caleb said. They used it to catch all the fraud alerts. When the bank sent a "Did you authorize this?" email, my mother clicked yes from that account. She was having a conversation with the bank, pretending to be me, using an email address she knew I had abandoned. But there was more. Caleb tapped a key, bringing up a security log. Our IT guys did a sweep of your current credentials, just to be safe, he said. Look at this log from 2 months ago. I leaned in. Failed login attempt. User of Laura's RMIT. IP address redacted. Illinois. They tried to hack into my alumni email, I whispered. And your current Gmail, Caleb added. They failed because you have 2-factor authentication set up on those, but they tried, multiple times, usually around the 1st of the month when statements are due. I sat back, the leather chair creaking. This wasn't just desperation. This wasn't a family in a tight spot making a bad decision to borrow some credit. This was surveillance. This was a calculated, predatory strike. They had skipped my graduation not just because they didn't care, but because they were busy robbing me. They needed me absent so they could be present in my financial life. They treat me like a resource, I said. I'm not a daughter. I'm a harvested organ. I'm a spare kidney they decided to sell. So, Caleb said, closing the laptop. We have the proof. We have the IP addresses. We have the signature match. We have the beneficiary of the funds clearly identified as your sister. The question is, how hard do you want to hit them? I looked at the binder. I looked at the line item for the $2,000 costume. I don't want to hit them, I said. I want to bury them. We spent the next 3 hours drafting the letter. It wasn't a polite request. It was a legal warhead. Notice of unauthorized activity and demand for restitution. The language was precise. We demanded an immediate freeze on all accounts using my name. We demanded a full accounting of every cent spent. We demanded a repayment plan to be signed and notarized within 14 days. And most importantly, we informed them that a police report for identity theft and fraud was being prepared and would be filed if these demands were not met immediately. This is going to detonate their world, Caleb warned me as he printed it on the heavy, cream-colored firm letterhead. Once we send this via certified mail, There is no going back to Thanksgiving dinners. I haven't been invited to Thanksgiving in 5 years, I said. Send it. The letter went out on a Tuesday. The silence that followed was heavy. I checked the tracking number every hour. Delivered. Signed for by D. Caldwell. For 24 hours. Nothing happened. No explosion. No police sirens. Just the waiting. Then, the breach came. I was in the lab, calibrating a servo motor for the new elbow joint prototype. My phone was on the workbench. Face down. It buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. A sustained, frantic vibration. I picked it up. It wasn't my parents. I had them blocked. And the barrier held. It was Noah. Noah Vance Olivia. Please pick up. It's an emergency. Noah Vance. Aunt Diane is hyperventilating. What did you do, Noah Vance? They're saying you're trying to send them to jail. Please call me. I stared at the messages. The emergency wasn't that they stole $80,000. The emergency was that they got caught. I didn't call. I typed a reply. Olivia, I am not trying to send anyone to jail. I am trying to fix a credit report that contains $78,000 of fraud. If they didn't want legal trouble, they shouldn't have forged my signature. The response from Noah was instantaneous. He was clearly sitting with them, acting as the relay station. Noah Vance. Mom says it's not fraud. It was an investment in the family. They were going to pay it back once Brielle got her principal contract. They just needed a bridge. You're making this into a crime when it's just a family misunderstanding. A family misunderstanding. I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that made Ben, my junior coder, look up from his desk in alarm. Everything okay, boss? He asked. Fine, I said. Just reading a fairy tale. I typed back to Noah. Olivia. A misunderstanding is taking the wrong umbrella. Opening 3 credit lines and a personal loan in someone else's name is a felony. Tell them to talk to the lawyer listed in the letter. I am not discussing this. A minute later, another message came through. This one felt like it was dictated directly by my mother. The syntax was hers. The guilt-tripping cadence was hers. Noah Vance. She says, We raised her. We sacrificed everything for her. How can she count pennies when we gave her a life? Family helps family. You don't involve the police in family business. I looked at the servo motor. It was a precise machine. It worked because the inputs matched the outputs. If you overloaded it, it broke. My family had overloaded me for 20 years and expected me to keep spinning. I typed my final response. I wanted it to be something they could not misinterpret. I wanted it to be the last thing Noah read aloud to them in their living room. Olivia family business does not come with interest rates. Tell them they have 13 days left to sign the repayment agreement. I put the phone in Do Not Disturb mode. I went back to the servo motor. My hands were steady. I was not shaking. I was done being the emotional shock absorber for their bad driving. 3 days later, I came home to my condo. The rain was lashing against the windows, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon. I checked my mailbox in the lobby. There was a thick, cream-colored envelope inside. The return address was embossed in silver foil. Vance Miller Wedding. It was Noah's wedding invitation. He had mentioned he was getting married in the fall, but I hadn't expected to be invited, given the nuclear war I had just started. Or perhaps the invite had been mailed before the cease and desist letter arrived. I took the elevator up to my floor. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the sofa. I opened the envelope. It was beautiful. Heavy cardstock, laser-cut lace detailing, professional calligraphy, together with their families. Noah Vance and Sarah Miller invite you to celebrate. I opened the inner fold. There was a program insert, listing the wedding party and the honored guests. I scanned the list. Parents of the groom, Robert and Linda Vance. Parents of the bride, David and Susan Miller. And then, right below them, listed under a special category titled Honorary Family Pillars of Support, Mark and Diane Caldwell, Brielle Caldwell. I read the list 3 times. My parents were listed as Pillars of Support. The people who had stolen my identity were honored guests. Brielle was there. My name was nowhere. I wasn't a bridesmaid. I wasn't a reader. I wasn't even listed as a cousin. I had been scrubbed from the record. It wasn't just that I wasn't invited to participate. It was that they had constructed a public tableau of the perfect family, and in this version of reality, the Caldwells consisted of Mark, Diane, and Brielle. I was a glitch they had patched out of the code. They were parading their status at a wedding, wearing clothes likely bought with my credit, accepting praise for being such a close-knit, supportive unit. I looked at the date of the wedding. It was in 3 weeks. The repayment deadline was in 10 days. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the prey has just walked into a trap. They wanted to play happy family in public. They wanted to pretend that the rot didn't exist. I picked up my phone and called Caleb. "It's late, Olivia," he answered, his voice groggy. "I know," I said. "I just got Noah's wedding invitation." "Do you want to send a gift?" Caleb asked. "No," I said. "I want to accept." And Caleb, "Make sure the process server knows where my parents will be on the 24th. I think it's time we made a public appearance." I looked at the invitation again. Pillars of support. I was going to bring that temple down. The wedding venue was a sprawling estate on the edge of Lake Michigan, a place where the lawn was trimmed to the millimeter and the air smelled of expensive white hydrangeas and old money. The sunlight was soft, filtering through the high branches of 100-year-old oaks, dappling the white folding chairs in a way that made everything look like a hazy, romantic dream. It was the kind of setting designed to make you believe in happy endings, in the permanence of love, and in the sanctity of family. But scenery is just a backdrop. It doesn't change the actors, and it certainly doesn't rewrite the script. I steered my rental car, a sleek, black German sedan that I had paid for with my own platinum card, up the gravel driveway. I parked far away from the main entrance, near a cluster of birch trees. This was a strategic choice. I needed an exit route that wasn't blocked by the valet line. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling. The air conditioning hummed, a cool barrier against the humid afternoon. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me was not the girl who had stood alone in a graduation gown 5 years ago. That girl had been hollowed out by rejection. This woman was filled with something else entirely: leverage. I was wearing a dress I had bought in a boutique in downtown Seattle. It was a deep, structural navy blue, sharp and tailored, contrasting with the sea of pastel chiffons I knew would be waiting inside. It was armor disguised as silk. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up my clutch. It was slightly heavier than a normal evening bag because, tucked inside the lining, folded into a crisp rectangle, was the file. It contained the transaction logs, the IP address traces, and the lawyer's demand letter that had technically already been delivered but, I suspected, was currently being ignored or hidden. I wasn't here to scream. I wasn't here to throw wine in anyone's face. I wasn't even here to reconcile. I had come for a much colder, more clinical reason. I needed to know if I still felt small when I stood next to them. I needed to verify that the phantom limb pain of my severed childhood was actually gone, or if it would flare up the moment I smelled my mother's perfume. I checked my phone. One unread message from Caleb. "Stand by. If you give the signal." I emailed the venue coordinator the legal notice regarding the honorary guests, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. I locked the phone and stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my heels, a satisfying, definitive sound. I walked toward the ceremony area. The guests were mingling on the lawn, holding flutes of champagne. I recognized faces from my childhood aunts who had sent generic birthday cards, cousins who had never asked why I stopped coming to Thanksgiving. They looked the same, just slightly eroded by time. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. I didn't stop to chat. I accepted a glass of sparkling water from a waiter and found a spot near a large stone planter, partially shaded by a trellis of climbing roses. From here, I had a clear line of sight to the front of the gathering, where the honorary family was holding court. And there they were. Seeing them was like looking at a photograph that had been left in the sun too long. The colors were right, but the edges were blurry. My father, Mark, was wearing a suit that looked expensive, likely charged to the account ending in 4021, the one under my name. But he didn't look like the confident patriarch I remembered. He looked diminished. His shoulders were hunched, and his eyes darted around the crowd with a nervous, frantic energy. He was laughing too loudly at a joke someone made. His hand gripping his champagne glass so hard, his knuckles were white. He looked like a man waiting for a tap on the shoulder. My mother, Diane, stood next to him. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered in the light. She was smiling. That practiced, radiant smile she used to turn on whenever Brielle took the stage. But from 20 feet away, I could see the cracks in the foundation. Her makeup was a little too heavy, trying to cover the dark circles of stress. She kept checking her phone, then shoving it back into her purse, then checking it again. She looked brittle, as if a strong breeze might shatter her into 1,000 sharp pieces. They were carrying the weight of the secret. They were carrying the $78,000, the fraud, the lie they had told the relatives about me being ungrateful. It was heavy, and it was dragging them down. And then there was Brielle. She was standing a few feet away from them, surrounded by a group of admirers. She looked objectively stunning. Her posture was perfect, the result of a lifetime at the bar. She was wearing a pale pink dress that highlighted her delicate frame. But as I watched, I saw the fatigue. It was in the way she shifted her weight, favoring her left ankle, the one that had cost a fortune to rehabilitate. It was in the way her smile dropped the second no one was looking directly at her face. She looked exhausted. She looked like a show pony that had been run too hard and put away wet. She was the golden child. Yes, but gold is a heavy metal. It weighs you down. I took a sip of water. The cold liquid felt good against my throat. I waited for the feeling. I waited for the old pang of jealousy, the desperate wish to be included in their circle. I waited to feel like the accessory, the background texture. I felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. I felt a mild, detached pity. They looked trapped. They were trapped in the lie they had built, trapped in the performance of success while the financial floor was rotting out from under them. I, standing alone in the shadow of the roses, was the only one who was actually free. The ceremony began. I sat in the back row, on the far edge. I watched Noah marry Sarah. It was a lovely service. They wrote their own vows. Noah promised to always be honest. I wondered if he knew his aunt and uncle were currently committing felony fraud to buy the clothes on their backs. When the ceremony ended, the guests migrated to the terrace for the reception. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. The string quartet began to play. This was the dangerous part, the mixing. I walked to the edge of the stone terrace, leaning against the balustrade, looking out at the lake. The water was calm, a sheet of dark glass. "I didn't think you'd come." The voice was tentative, soft. I turned. Brielle was standing there. She held a glass of white wine, her fingers wrapped tightly around the stem. Up close, the exhaustion was even more visible. There were fine lines around her eyes that shouldn't have been there at 22. "I was invited," I said calmly. "Noah sent a card. Mom and Dad said you wouldn't show," Brielle said. She didn't come closer. She stayed 3 feet away, respecting a boundary she could sense but couldn't see. "They said you were going through a phase, that you were angry." "I am not angry," I said. "I am just accurate. There is a difference." Brielle looked down at her wine. "They are really stressed. Liv, I don't know what's happening, but Mom has been crying at night. Dad is on the phone with the bank constantly. They keep saying it's a misunderstanding." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "Is it a misunderstanding?" I looked at my sister. The girl who had received the car with the red bow while I waited in the snow. The girl whose recital was worth more than my degree. "Ask them about the signature," I said. "Ask them whose hand held the pen on the loan application for your Paris trip." Brielle flinched. "Paris. They said they got a bonus." "They didn't get a bonus," I said. "They got a daughter with a good credit score." She opened her mouth to speak, but a shadow fell over us. The air shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Olivia." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Breathless and disbelief-laden. I turned my head slowly. My mother was standing there. She had spotted us. She had broken away from the honorary family circle and rushed over, her silver dress rustling. My father was trailing behind her, looking like a man walking to the gallows. Diane Caldwell stared at me. She took in the tailored navy dress, the expensive haircut, the way I held myself with a stillness she had never taught me. She looked at me like I was a ghost that had walked out of a grave she had personally dug. "You're here," she whispered. Her hand went to her throat, fingering the pearl necklace that I knew, for a fact, had been purchased at Nordstrom 3 months ago using the Visa card ending in 5589. My Visa card. "Hello, Diane," I said. "Hello, Mark?" I didn't call them Mom and Dad. The titles felt incorrect, like calling a landlord friend. My father cleared his throat. He looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone was watching. "Liv, we didn't expect you. Noah said you were busy." "I made time," I said. "It's a special occasion." "We need to talk," my mother hissed, stepping closer. Her voice dropped to that urgent, conspiratorial whisper she used to use when she wanted me to hide a bad grade or cover for a lie. "Not here. Not in front of everyone, but we need to settle this. You are scaring your father." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I am standing on a terrace drinking water. If you are scared, that is an internal reaction to your own choices." "Stop it," she said, her eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate anger. "Stop acting like this, like you're some stranger. We are your family. We did what we had to do. We were going to fix it. We are still going to fix it." "You have 10 days, I said. The letter was clear. 10 days to sign the admission of debt and the repayment plan, or the police report gets filed. My father winced as if I had slapped him. "Liv, please, think about Brielle. Think about the family reputation. If this gets out..." "If this gets out," I repeated. "You mean the truth." I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull the file out completely. I just let the corner of the blue legal folder peek out, just enough for them to see the label. Flores v. Caldwell. Fraud evidence. My father's eyes locked onto the folder. He went pale. "You brought it here," he whispered, "to a wedding." "I carry my life with me now," I said. "Unlike you, I don't leave things behind." My mother reached out. For a second, I thought she was going to try to grab the bag, but she stopped. Her hand hovered in the air. Trembling, she looked at my face, really looked at me, and I saw the realization hit her. She couldn't bully me. She couldn't guilt me. She couldn't order me to check under the sofa for a jazz shoe. I was taller than her now, not physically, but in every way that mattered. Her face crumpled. The anger drained away, replaced by a terrifying, cloying sweetness. It was the performance she saved for the most desperate moments. Her eyes filled with tears, tears that she could summon on command. She took a step closer. Ignoring the boundary I had drawn, she reached out and touched my arm. Her fingers were cold. "Olivia," she whispered, her voice trembling with a manufactured emotion that was thick enough to choke on. "My baby, you came back. We knew you would. Deep down, we knew." She squeezed my arm. "We've been waiting for you," she said softly, a tear tracking perfectly down her cheek. "We've been waiting for you to come home." The words hung in the air, sticky and sweet, like rotting fruit. "We've been waiting for you." I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her tearful eyes. I looked at my father, who was watching with bated breath, hoping the old magic would work, hoping the strong daughter would cave, would forgive, would take the burden one last time. My mind was a vault of cold, hard steel. No, I thought, you weren't waiting for me. You were waiting for the debt collection date. You were waiting for the statute of limitations to expire. You were waiting for the victim to return to the scene of the crime so you could bleed her dry one more time. I didn't pull away. I didn't smile. I just looked at her, and I prepared to speak the words that would shatter the glass house forever. I gently removed my mother's hand from my arm. I did not shove it away. I simply lifted it by the wrist, as if I were removing a stray thread from a coat, and dropped it back to her side. The physical rejection was small, but in the language of our family, where appearances were everything, it was a scream. We stood in a tight circle near the stone balustrade. To the rest of the wedding guests, we probably looked like a touching family reunion, a mother overcoming emotion, a father leaning in with concern, two sisters finally together, but the air between us was toxic. It vibrated with the kind of tension that shatters glass. "You vanished," my mother said. Her voice was no longer sweet. The tear on her cheek had dried, leaving a faint, salty track through her foundation. "You just disappeared. Do you have any idea what that did to us? The worry, the sleepless nights." "I doubt you lost much sleep," I said. "Unless it was worrying about who would pay for the next semester of ballet." "That is unfair," my father cut in. His voice was a low growl, kept quiet to avoid attracting the attention of the server refilling champagne glasses 5 feet away. "You hurt your mother. You hurt the family. And for what? Because we missed a ceremony. Because of one afternoon." He shook his head, looking at me with a mix of disappointment and disbelief. "Just for a small thing," he said. "You destroyed this family for a small thing." I looked at him, the man who had told me I was strong so he wouldn't have to be present, the man who had sat in his recliner while I walked to the bus stop in the dark. "MIT was not small," I said. My voice was level. I wasn't raising it. I didn't need volume. I had precision. "But you are right about one thing. Mark, it wasn't just about MIT. The graduation was just the punctuation mark at the end of a very long sentence." "Oh, here we go," my mother sighed, looking away, playing the martyr. "She's going to list her grievances. She's going to rewrite history. I don't need to rewrite it," I said. "I just need to read it back to you." I stepped closer, invading their personal space. I saw my father flinch. 12 years old," I said. "My birthday. You forgot it because you couldn't find a jazz shoe. You didn't apologize. You told me not to be tragic." My mother opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. 16, I continued. "The science fair. I walked 2 miles with a display board because Brielle needed her ankle iced. You told me I was capable. You made my neglect sound like a compliment." I turned my gaze to the car park visible in the distance. 18, I said. "Christmas morning, the white sedan with the red bow. You gave it to the daughter with the learner's permit. You told the daughter with the job to take the bus. You watched me stand in the snow. Dad, you drank your coffee and watched me shiver from the window. We didn't have the money for 2 cars. My father hissed. "We did the best we could." "You had the money," I corrected him. "You just spent it all on one investment, and when that investment got too expensive, you decided to liquidate the other asset, me." "We never saw it that way," my mother said, her voice trembling with indignation. "We loved you both. Brielle needed more help. She is an artist. The world is harder for artists. And the world is easy for engineers," I asked. "You think I didn't need help? You think I didn't want to ride? You think I didn't want to see my parents in the stands when they called my name?" I looked at the 3 of them. "I kept 3 seats empty," I said softly. "For 4 hours. I watched every other student walk to their families. I walked to a stone pillar and blocked your number." Brielle made a sound. It was a small, choked intake of breath. She had been staring at the ground, twisting her wine glass, but now she looked up. Her eyes were wide, swimming with a sudden, dawning horror. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Liv, I swear, I didn't know you waited. Mom said you didn't care. She said you told them not to come because it was boring." My mother stiffened. She shot a look at Brielle, a sharp, warning glare that I had seen 1,000 times. It was the look that said, "Stick to the script." "Brielle," my mother warned. "Don't?" "She said I thought it was boring," I repeated, looking at my mother. "That's a creative edit, just like the edit you made to the credit application." "We are not talking about money here," my father said quickly, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "This is a wedding. For God's sake, Olivia, have some dignity." "Dignity," I said, tasting the word. Is that what you call it? Is it dignified to forge your daughter's signature? Is it dignified to steal $78,000 to pay for hotels in Paris and costumes you couldn't afford? The number hung in the air between us. 78,000. Brielle dropped her glass. It didn't shatter. Thank God. It fell onto the grass, spilling white wine across the hem of her pink dress. But the sound of it hitting the turf was like a gunshot in the silence of our circle. 78,000, Brielle repeated. Her voice was high, thin. What are you talking about? Ask them, I said, nodding at our parents. Ask them how they paid for your summer intensive. Ask them how they paid for the European tour. Ask them why my credit report looks like a crime scene. It was a loan, my mother hissed, stepping between me and Brielle, trying to block the flow of information. It was a family loan. We were going to pay it back. We are going to pay it back. You are making it sound like we robbed a bank. You robbed me, I said. I lifted the clutch. I unzipped it. The sound of the zipper was loud. I pulled the blue folder out just an inch further. I didn't take it out completely. I didn't wave it around. I just held it there, pressed against my chest, a blue rectangle of doom. This is the file, I said. It contains the IP logs. It contains the email verification from the account you thought I forgot. It contains the affidavit from the handwriting expert confirming the signature is a trace. My father stared at the folder. He looked like he was going to be sick. The color had drained from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. Do you have a handwriting expert? He stammered. I have a very good lawyer, I said. And he has a very low tolerance for fraud. Olivia, my father pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, put that away. People are looking. If Noah sees, if the family sees, you'll humiliate us. Do you want to shame us in front of everyone? He gestured vaguely at the wedding guests, the laughing couples, the children dancing on the lawn. I don't need to shame you, I said. I didn't create the shame, Mark. I just brought the receipt. The truth does the shaming all by itself. We can fix this, my mother said, her hands fluttering. We can sit down tomorrow. We can work out a payment plan. Just don't file it. Don't go to the police. Think of your sister. If we get into legal trouble, her contract, the company won't like the scandal. Always Brielle, I said. Even now, even when you are facing a felony charge, your first thought is how it affects her ballet career. I looked at Brielle. She was standing frozen, wine dripping from her dress onto her shoes. She looked from me to our parents, and for the first time, I saw the blindfold slip. She wasn't just the golden child anymore. She was the accomplice. Unwitting, perhaps, but she was realizing that her pedestal was built on my back. I gave you a deadline, I said to my parents. You have 10 days, but seeing you here, seeing you listed as pillars of support on that program, I realized something. You don't think you did anything wrong. You think you're the victims. We did what parents do, my mother cried, her voice rising dangerously close to a shout. We survived. We made sure one of you made it. One of us did make it, I said cold. I made it, despite you, not because of you. I started to turn away. I had seen enough. I had seen the fear in their eyes. I had seen the pathetic reality of their lives, two people drowning in debt and delusion, clutching at the appearance of status while rot ate the foundations. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt enormous. I felt like a skyscraper looking down at an anthill. Wait. The voice was shaky, but loud. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was Brielle. She stepped forward. She didn't look at me. She was looking at our mother. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and wet. Brielle, honey, go clean your dress, my mother said quickly, sensing danger. Go to the restroom. We'll handle this. No, Brielle said. She took another step. She looked at me now. Her eyes were searching my face, looking for the truth of that day 5 years ago. You said they skipped your graduation for my recital, Brielle said. Yes, I said. The spring showcase. And Mom, Brielle turned to Diane. You told Olivia the recital was rescheduled. That's why you couldn't go. You texted her that. It was a conflict, my mother snapped. The times overlapped. It was a scheduling nightmare. You know how the studio is. No, Brielle said. Her voice was gaining strength, trembling with a sudden, devastating realization. No, Mom. The guests at the nearest table had stopped talking. The silence was spreading. Brielle, stop it, my father warned. The recital wasn't rescheduled, Brielle said. She spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the humid air like a knife. I remember that day. I remember because I was nervous. I asked you if we could move the time so Dad could fly to Boston and come back. I asked you specifically. She looked at me, tears spilling over her lashes. They told me no, Brielle said. They told me the studio set the time in stone, but I checked the schedule later, for the scrapbook. She took a breath that sounded like a sob. The recital was at 7 o'clock in the evening. Mom, Olivia's ceremony was at 10 in the morning. I froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I had always believed they chose between two simultaneous events. I had believed it was a choice of priority. I thought they picked the recital because it was at the same time. 7 o'clock, I whispered. They could have made it, Brielle said, her voice breaking. They could have flown. They could have driven. They didn't have to choose. They just didn't go. She looked at our parents with a look of absolute betrayal. You lied to me, Brielle said. You told me it was impossible, but you just didn't want to go. My mother's face went from gray to white. She looked like a statue that had just been pushed off a ledge. It would have been exhausting, my mother stammered. The flight, the traffic, we needed to be fresh for your performance. We needed to focus. You skipped her graduation because you didn't want to be tired. Brielle screamed. It was the first time I had ever heard my sister raise her voice at them. You skipped her MIT graduation because you wanted a nap. The words hung there, suspended in the amber light of the setting sun. I looked at my parents, and finally, I saw them, not as monsters, not as villains, but as something much smaller and much more pathetic. They were selfish, profoundly, lazily, casually selfish. They hadn't stayed away because of a tragic conflict. They stayed away because it was inconvenient, and then they stole my money to pretend they were good parents to the one child they decided was worth the effort. I gripped the folder. Well, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Now we all know exactly what the truth looks like. I turned to my father. 10 days, I said. Or I hand this folder to the police. And Dad, I think Brielle just resigned as your character witness. The silence that followed Brielle's revelation was different from the silence of the empty chairs 5 years ago. That silence had been cold and hollow. This silence was heavy, hot, and suffocating. It was the sound of a guillotine blade that had dropped and severed the last tendon holding a family together. 7 o'clock, I repeated. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. My ceremony was at 10 in the morning. You could have done both. My mother, Diane, looked around frantically. The veneer of the perfect matriarch was cracking, revealing the panicked operator beneath. She wasn't looking at me with remorse. She was looking at the guests, terrifyingly afraid that the facade was slipping. It wasn't that simple, she hissed, her voice low and desperate. It wasn't just about the time. Olivia, you don't understand how these things work. Then explain it, I said. Explain why a nap was more important than my degree. It wasn't a nap, she snapped. There was a scout. A director from the Royal Winnipeg Ballet was going to be in the audience. He was a guest of the studio owner. We were specifically told that he looks at the whole package. He wanted to see the support system. He wanted to see the dedicated family in the front row, fresh, happy, and fully engaged. She gestured wildly at herself and my father. We couldn't risk arriving late. We couldn't risk looking haggard from a flight. We couldn't risk traffic on the I-90. We had to be there, looking like the perfect, supportive parents he wanted to see. It was for Brielle's future. I looked at Brielle. She was staring at our mother with a look of absolute horror. You skipped her graduation for a photo op, Brielle whispered. You used me as an excuse because you needed to look good for a scout who didn't even sign me. He might have my mother insisted. We had to try. We did it for you. Brielle, everything we do is for you. Stop saying that, Brielle shouted. The guests turned. The string quartet faltered for a second before regaining their rhythm. Stop saying it's for me. You made me the reason Olivia hates us. You made me the villain in her life so you could play the dedicated stage parents. I watched them. I watched the dynamic that had governed my entire life play out in real time. The spotlight. It was a physical force in our family. It didn't matter what the truth was. The spotlight always had to be trained on Brielle. Even now, in the middle of a confession about abandoning me, the justification was still about Brielle's career, Brielle's potential, Brielle's needs. I didn't feel angry at my sister. I looked at her wine-stained, trembling, realizing that her golden cage was built on a foundation of lies, and I just felt a profound, exhausting clarity. I don't hate her, I said calmly, interrupting my mother's frantic defense. I don't hate Brielle. She didn't make the choice. You did. I stepped closer to Diane. You gambled, I said. You bet everything on her becoming a star. And to fund that bet, you cashed out your other daughter, first emotionally, and then financially. We didn't think it would hurt you this much, my mother said. Her eyes filled with those weaponized tears again. Liv, you were always so independent. You were always so fine. You never needed us to hold your hand. We thought you understood the bigger picture. I was fine because I had to be, I said. Being able to survive without water doesn't mean I don't get thirsty. It just means I learned how to endure a drought. Fine is not the same thing as not needing parents. Diane, it just means I stopped asking because the answer was always no. We loved you, my father mumbled. He was looking at his shoes. We do love you. You love the idea of me, I corrected. You love having a smart daughter you can brag about to the neighbors, as long as she doesn't ask for a ride to the airport or a seat at her graduation. You love the asset. You don't love the person. I looked at the folder in my hand, the blue legal file. You have 10 days, I said again, to sign the repayment plan, to admit to the fraud, or I file the police report. Olivia, please, my mother begged, reaching out again but stopping short of touching me. Don't ruin this. Not today. Not with the wedding. The wedding is lovely, I said. Enjoy the cake. I hear it's expensive. I turned around. I walked away. I didn't look back at Brielle. I didn't look back at the parents who were undoubtedly already huddling together, composing a new lie to tell the relatives about why I had stormed off. I walked across the manicured lawn, past the white chairs, past the happy couples, and to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before starting the engine. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. It was over. The confrontation I had played out in my head for 5 years had finally happened. They hadn't apologized. They hadn't begged for forgiveness. They had just made excuses. And strangely, that was better. If they had apologized, I might have wavered. Their excuses were the concrete I needed to seal the door shut. I drove back to my hotel. It was a sleek, modern place in downtown Chicago, 40 minutes away from the venue. I had booked a suite with a view of the river. I ordered room service, a burger and a glass of red wine, and sat by the window, watching the city lights reflect on the water. My phone rang at 11 o'clock at night. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number, no caller ID. I knew who it was. I had blocked his cell, my mother's cell, and the house line. He was calling from a burner, or maybe a payphone, if those even existed anymore. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the curiosity was a hook in my gut. I answered. I didn't say hello. I just listened. I didn't sign it. The voice was hushed, frantic. It was my father. He sounded like he was hiding in a closet. There was a slight echo. Mark, I said. It is late. I need you to know, he whispered. I need you to know before you do whatever you are going to do with that file. I didn't sign the loan application. I didn't know about the second credit card. I sat up straighter. You're lying. The money went into the joint account. You spent it. I thought it was a bonus, he said, his voice cracking. Your mother? She handles the books. You know that. She told me she got an advance on her commission. She told me the studio worked out a payment plan for the Paris trip. I didn't ask questions. I was just relieved we could pay for it. Ignorance is not a defense in court, Mark, I said coldly. You benefited from the fraud. You wore the suit. You flew on the plane. I know. He wept. He was actually crying now. A pathetic, sniffling sound. But you have to understand why she did it. We were desperate. Liv. The deposit for the intensive was due. We were tapped out, maxed out. If we didn't pay within 48 hours, Brielle would have lost her spot. Your mother, she panicked. So she became a felon, I said. She thought she could fix it, he said. She thought well. She knew you were working at the lab. She knew you were making good money. She thought she could take the loan out in your name, pay the deposit, and then pay off the loan bit by bit before you ever noticed. She thought she was borrowing it, without asking me, I said, because she knew I would say no, because she knew you would lecture us, he snapped, a flash of his old defensiveness breaking through. You were always so rigid about money, so responsible. She was trying to save the dream. Olivia. She was trying to save Brielle's chance. And when she couldn't pay it back, I asked, when the interest piled up, what was the plan then? She was drowning, he whispered. We were drowning, and then when you cut us off, when you blocked us, he hesitated. Say it, I commanded. It made it easier, he admitted. His voice was barely audible. When you disappeared, it was easier to pretend you weren't real, to pretend the debt was just numbers. If we didn't see you, we didn't have to feel the guilt. So you erased me, I said. You erased me to make the theft palatable. We had to explain why you weren't there, he rushed on, the confessions spilling out of him like vomit. The aunts, the cousins they kept asking, where is Olivia? Why isn't she at Christmas? Why isn't she at the recital? We couldn't say we skipped your graduation. We couldn't say we stole your identity. I closed my eyes. I knew what was coming. I had felt the chill of it at the wedding, in the way the relatives looked at me. So we told them you changed, he said. We told them MIT went to your head. We told them you got a big job in Seattle and decided you were too good for us. We told them you called us simple. We told them you cut us off because we weren't successful enough for you. I laughed. It was a dark, jagged sound. You painted me as a snob, I said. You destroyed my character to cover your crimes. You made me the villain of the family story so you could play the victims of an ungrateful child. We had to save face, he cried. The community, the studio, everyone looks up to us as the devoted parents. We couldn't let them know we were broke and estranged. You are pathetic, I said. You are truly, deeply pathetic. I know, he sobbed. I know, Liv. But please, if you file that report, if you sue us, they will all know. The lie will fall apart. Everyone will know. That is the point, Mark, I said. That is the entire point. Wait, he said. There is one more thing. You need to know. His voice changed. The weeping stopped. A new tone entered fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. What? I asked. The bank, he whispered. The lender for the big personal loan. The one your mother took out in your name. What about it? They sold the debt, he said. They sold it to a collection agency last month, an aggressive one. We stopped making the minimum payments 3 months ago. We couldn't keep up. My stomach turned over. And I got a notice yesterday, he said. Not a warning. A court summons. They are suing for the full amount plus legal fees and interest. They are garnishing wages. They are suing you, I asked. No, he whispered. The loan isn't in my name. Olivia, it's in yours. The room seemed to spin. The summons is for you, he said. They just mailed it to our address because that's what is on file. But the defendant is Olivia Flores. The court date is next Tuesday. If you don't show up, if you don't contest it, they will issue a default judgment against you. They will seize your accounts. They will garnish your wages at the lab. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. You have a lawsuit sitting on your kitchen counter with my name on it, I said, my voice trembling with rage. And you weren't going to tell me. We didn't know how, he cried. We were hoping to find the money before the court date. We bought a lottery ticket. We were trying to sell the second car. You were waiting for a lottery ticket to save me from a lawsuit, I screamed. We are trapped, he wailed. Liv, you have to help us. If you tell them it's fraud, they arrest Mom. If you don't, they take your money. We are trapped. No, I said. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked at the dark river below. You are trapped. I am just beginning. I hung up the phone. I stared at the device. Next Tuesday, I didn't have 10 days for them to sign a repayment plan. I didn't have time for a polite negotiation. The war wasn't theoretical anymore. It was knocking on the door. I picked up the phone again and dialed Caleb. It was midnight. I didn't care. Wake up, I said when he answered. The timeline has moved up. They are being sued, and my name is on the docket. When? Caleb asked, his voice instantly sharp, shaking off sleep. Next Tuesday, I said. Get the paperwork ready. We aren't just filing a police report. Caleb, we are going to court. The morning sun hitting the glass table in Caleb's hotel suite didn't feel like the start of a new day. It felt like the lighting for an interrogation. We weren't drinking coffee. We were consuming caffeine as a tactical necessity. The table was covered in paperwork affidavits, cease and desist drafts, and the terrifyingly thick summons from the collection agency. We have to move fast, Caleb said, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. The court date for the collection lawsuit is Tuesday. We need to file an emergency motion to stay the proceedings based on identity fraud. But Olivia, once we file that motion, the clock starts ticking on your parents. The court will demand a police report to prove you aren't just trying to dodge the debt. I know, I said. I picked up a pen. It felt heavy. The moment I sign this affidavit stating I did not authorize the loan, I am essentially signing their arrest warrant. You are signing your own exoneration, Caleb corrected. Don't confuse the two. They signed their own warrant when they forged your name. He was right. This was chess, not a family therapy session. If I didn't make a move, I would be checkmated by a garnishment order that would ruin my security clearance at the lab. My career, my reputation, my financial future, it was all sitting in the center of the board. File it, I said. But file the dispute with the credit bureaus first. I want every single account frozen. I want it so that they can't even buy a pack of gum using my name. Done, Caleb said. He began typing furiously. I'm also sending a formal demand letter to their attorney, to them, since they don't have an attorney yet. It states that all future communication goes through me. If they try to call you, text you, or show up at your hotel, it will be considered harassment. They won't hire a lawyer, I said, staring at the skyline. They can't afford one. They spent the legal fund on tutus. By noon, the digital walls were going up. We sent the notifications. We flagged the accounts. I watched on Caleb's laptop as my credit profile went into lockdown mode. It was satisfying in a dark, clinical way. It was like watching a surgeon cauterize a wound. It hurt, but it stopped the bleeding. At 2:00, the first countermove arrived. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Noah. He met us in the hotel lobby. He looked tired. The wedding joy had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of being the messenger between two warring states. They're panicking. Liv, Noah said, sitting on the edge of the velvet armchair. Uncle Mark is hyperventilating. Aunt Diane she's packing boxes. Packing? I asked. She wants to talk to you, Noah said. She says she will sell everything, the jewelry, the silver, the second car. She says she can raise $20,000 by Monday if she liquidates the house assets. She's begging for a meeting. Private. Just you and her. $20,000 is a down payment on a $78,000 problem, I said coldly. And it doesn't address the fraud. She knows, Noah said. She wants to offer a deal. She sells the stuff, gives you the cash to pay off the immediate arrears so the lawsuit gets dropped, and then they sign a promissory note for the rest. But she needs you to not file the police report. She's terrified of jail. Liv? I looked at Caleb. He gave a subtle nod. It was a potential off-ramp. I will meet her, I said to Noah. But not alone, and not without conditions. What conditions? Noah asked. One, I said, holding up a finger. She signs a full confession, a legal document admitting to the fraud. If she misses one payment in the future, I take that confession straight to the district attorney. It's my insurance policy. Noah nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, what else? Two, I said. We set the repayment schedule. Auto draft. The second the money hits their account, it comes to me. And three, I leaned forward. This was the one that mattered more than the money. They fixed the narrative, I said. They told the entire family I was an arrogant snob who abandoned them. They told the aunts and cousins I was ungrateful. That ends today. They will write a letter to the family, a casual update clarifying that there was a misunderstanding, that I have been supporting them through a difficult financial time, and that the distance was due to their error, not mine. Noah looked uncomfortable. You want them to humiliate themselves? I want them to tell the truth, I said. If that is humiliating, that is their problem. Noah left to relay the terms. An hour later, he texted, they agree, tomorrow morning, the conference room at the venue. That evening, I got a knock on my hotel room door. I checked the peephole. It was Brielle. I opened the door. She wasn't wearing pink. She was wearing jeans and a gray sweater, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger, and for the first time, she looked like a sister, not a competitor. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked to the window, looking out at the same view I had been staring at. I'm quitting the company, she said. I froze. What? The local company, she clarified. I'm not quitting dance, but I can't dance for them anymore. Not when I know my tuition was paid with stolen money. I felt dirty. Every time I put on those point shoes, I'll think about your credit score. She turned to face me. I'm going to tell them. Liv, she said. About the recital. You don't have to, I said. The damage is done. I do have to, she said fiercely. Mom is trying to spin it. She's telling Dad that it was just a miscommunication, that they really did think the times conflicted. She's trying to gaslight him, and he's letting her because it's easier than admitting he was a coward. She took a deep breath. I'm going to write a statement, Brielle said. For the family mediation tomorrow, I'm going to go on record that I checked the schedule, that I asked them to go to your graduation, and that they refused because they wanted to network with the director. I looked at her. It was a brave thing to do. It was biting the hand that had fed her, even if that hand had stolen the food. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me, she said, her voice breaking. I should have done it 5 years ago. I knew. Liv, deep down, I knew something was wrong when you didn't come home for Christmas. I liked being the favorite. I liked the attention. We are trained to like the light, I said gently. It's phototropism. It's biological. It's selfish, she said. And I'm done. Later that night, Caleb and I were finalizing the documents for the morning meeting. We were building the binder, the physical representation of their crimes. We had the bank statements, the IP logs, the fake emails. I found something else, Caleb said. He didn't look happy. I was doing a deep dive into their digital footprint, to see if they opened accounts anywhere else. Did they? I asked, bracing myself. No other financial accounts, Caleb said. But I found this. He turned his laptop around. It was a Facebook page. My mother's public profile. I scrolled through the timeline. It was a shrine to Brielle, mostly. Photos of recitals, competitions, awards. But then, Caleb pointed to a post from 3 years ago. It was a photo of me. A photo from the MIT website. announcing a small award I had won for my undergraduate research. The caption read, "So proud of our Olivia. Her groundbreaking research at MIT is changing the world. It's hard having her so far away, but we know our support and sacrifice helped get her there. Proud parents, MIT mom." I felt a wave of nausea. "There are more," Caleb said. He clicked on another post. This one was from a year ago, a photo of the Redwood Kinetics logo. "My daughter, the lead engineer at Redwood, is working on top-secret projects. If anyone needs an introduction to the tech world, let us know. We are so blessed to have raised such a genius." I read the comments. "Wow. Diane, you must be so proud. You guys did a great job raising her." And my mother's replies. "Thank you. It took a lot of late nights and guidance, but she's our star." I stared at the screen. "They were using me," I whispered. At the same time, they were telling the cousins I was a stuck-up snob. They were using my resume to clout chase online. "It gets worse," Caleb said. "Look at this thread." He opened a message board for the local arts council. My father had posted in a discussion about funding. As the father of an MIT graduate and a professional ballerina, I know what it takes to cultivate excellence. We poured our resources into both girls equally. It requires sacrifice. "Equally," I said. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. "They didn't just steal your money," Caleb said softly. "They stole your achievements. They wore your success like a costume while they were actively robbing you." This was the final piece, the twist that locked everything into place. It wasn't just neglect, it was exploitation. They wanted the credit for the engineer without the inconvenience of the daughter. They wanted the prestige of the MIT degree without paying for the plane ticket to see it handed out. I felt a cold, hard anger settle in my chest. It wasn't the hot, reactive anger of the wedding. This was the cold, strategic anger of a general who has just seen the enemy's battle plans. "Print them," I said. "All of them?" Caleb asked. "Every screenshot," I said. "Every comment, every hashtag. Print them in color." I walked over to the table where the binder lay open. "They want a private meeting," I said. "They want to settle this quietly to save their reputation." I picked up the proud parents' screenshot. "I am going to make them eat these words," I said. "Literally, if I have to." I checked the time. It was 2 a.m. The meeting was at 9. "Caleb," I said, "draft one more document." "What is it?" "A non-disclosure agreement," I said, but in reverse. "Explain," he said, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Usually, an NDA is to keep people quiet," I said. "I want a document that forces them to speak. I want a clause that says if they ever use my name, my title, or my employer for social clout again, if they ever claim credit for my success in a public forum, the deal is void, and I file the police report immediately." "That is unconventional," Caleb said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "but legally enforceable as a condition of the settlement." "Good," I said, "because I am done being their trophy and their bank account on the same day." I closed the binder. The snap of the ring sounded like a judge's gavel. "Let's get some sleep," I said. "Tomorrow, we go to collect." I went to my room, but I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about the 3 empty chairs. I thought about the proud parents hashtag. For 5 years, I had wondered why I wasn't enough for them. I had wondered what I lacked. Now I knew. I didn't lack anything. I had too much. I had too much talent, too much resilience, too much value. And they were parasites who had latched onto the host. Tomorrow, I wasn't just getting my money back, I was getting the surgery to remove them. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in 5 years, I didn't see the empty chairs. I saw a spreadsheet, and all the columns balanced perfectly. The conference room at the wedding venue was designed for joy. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, a polished mahogany table meant for signing marriage certificates, and a vase of fresh peonies in the center. It was a beautiful room. It was a terrible place for an execution. We sat on one side of the table. Caleb and I formed a united front of navy blue suits and legal binders. On the other side sat my parents. They looked like refugees from a different life. My mother, Diane, was wearing a crisp linen blazer, trying to project the image of the capable matriarch, but her hands were twisting a tissue into a tight white rope. My father, Mark, looked gray. He stared at the peonies as if they were alien life forms. Brielle sat at the far end of the table, slightly apart from them, her arms crossed over her chest. Noah stood by the door, the reluctant sentry, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Let us begin," Caleb said. His voice was calm, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. "We are here to resolve the matter of the unauthorized debt incurred under Olivia Flores's identity, currently totaling $78,422. My mother straightened her spine. The performance began. "Now, hold on," she said, flashing a strained, tight smile at Caleb. "I think we need to watch our language here. Unauthorized is a very strong word. We are a family. We share resources. This was a misunderstanding about how the funds were allocated. We always intended to pay it back. It was essentially an internal family loan that got a little out of hand." She looked at me, her eyes pleading for me to play along with the script. "Right, Liv?" she asked. "We just got our wires crossed." I didn't smile back. "This isn't a crossed wire, Diane," I said. "It's a forged signature. It was an implied consent," she argued, her voice rising. "You were busy. You were in Seattle. I handled the paperwork because I didn't want to bother you. I was trying to be helpful." Caleb raised a hand. He didn't slam it on the table. He just held it up, a stop sign made of flesh and bone. "Mrs. Caldwell," Caleb said, "let me be clear. In the eyes of the law, there is no such thing as an internal family loan when one party is unaware of the transaction. There is no implied consent for a $78,000 promissory note. That is called felony fraud. That is called identity theft. And if we walk out of this room without a signed agreement, the conversation shifts from a civil settlement to a criminal investigation." My mother flinched. The word criminal hit her like a physical blow. "We were desperate." My father spoke up, his voice raspy. He finally looked away from the flowers. "We didn't want to hurt anyone." "But you did hurt someone," I said. I reached for the binder. I opened it to the tab marked timeline. "June 15th, I read aloud. "You charged $5,000 for the Paris trip deposit. That was 3 days after you skipped my graduation." I flipped the page. "July 2nd, $2,000 for costumes. September 10th, $4,000 for travel expenses." I looked up at them. "You weren't desperate for food," I said. "You weren't desperate for medicine. You were desperate for applause. You used my credit score to buy a spotlight for Brielle because you couldn't afford the electricity bill yourselves." "She needed it," my mother cried out. The mask slipped completely. The poise vanished, replaced by a raw, frantic defense. "She had a chance, Olivia. She had a real chance to be something special, to be a principal dancer. You don't understand the pressure. You don't understand what it's like to see your child so close to a dream and know that money is the only thing standing in the way. So you sacrificed your other child," I said. "You were fine," she shouted. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they weren't the manipulative tears of the wedding. These were tears of genuine, distorted frustration. "You were always fine. You were at MIT. You had the scholarships. You had the job lined up. You were strong. Olivia, you could handle a little debt. You could handle the struggle. Brielle, she breaks. She is delicate. If we told her we couldn't afford Paris, it would have crushed her." The room went silent. There it was, the core truth, the nucleus of the entire dysfunction. "I could handle it," I repeated slowly. "That is your justification, that I was strong enough to survive your theft." "We knew you would figure it out," my mother sobbed. "We knew you would land on your feet. You always do. We thought we could borrow from your strength to save her." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a mother. I saw a parasite that resented the host for having blood to spare. Enduring isn't consenting, I said. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. Just because I can carry the weight doesn't mean you had the right to drop it on me. Just because I don't break doesn't mean I don't bleed. You punished me for my competence. Diane, you taxed my survival to subsidize her dream. I didn't mean to, she wailed. I love you both. No, a voice cut in from the end of the table. Brielle stood up. She looked pale, but her eyes were dry. You don't love us both, Brielle said. You love the show, and you love the audience. My mother stared at her golden child, stunned. Brielle, she whispered, don't say that. It's true, Brielle said. She looked at me. I let it happen. Liv, I'm sorry. I knew we didn't have money. I knew Dad was stressed. But when the tickets appeared, when the costumes arrived, I didn't ask questions, because I wanted to be the star. I wanted to be the one you guys looked at. She turned to our parents. But being the favorite is just another way of being used, Brielle said. You used Olivia for her credit, and you used me for your ego. You needed me to succeed so you could feel successful. And you needed Olivia to fail, or at least to be invisible so you didn't have to feel guilty about ignoring her. She looked down at her hands. I'm done, Brielle said. I'm not dancing in Europe. I'm getting a job. A real job. And I'm going to pay Olivia back for every cent of that Paris trip. My father put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. Caleb slid the document across the table. This is the settlement agreement, Caleb said. It states that you, Mark and Diane Caldwell, accept full liability for the debt. You acknowledge that Olivia Flores had no knowledge of these accounts. You agree to a repayment schedule of $1,500 a month, automatically drafted, until the principal and interest are paid in full. He tapped the paper. It also states that you will contact the collection agency and the court today to confess judgment, removing Olivia's name from the lawsuit. You will close every account associated with her social security number, and, Caleb paused, looking at the final clause. You are legally prohibited from contacting Olivia Flores for any reason other than the transmission of payment confirmation. If you miss a payment, or if you attempt to contact her, the suspended police report for identity fraud will be filed immediately. My mother looked at the paper. She looked at the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. No contact, she whispered. Liv, you're cutting us out forever. You cut me out 5 years ago, I said. I'm just making it legal. She looked at me, her eyes swimming with a desperate need for absolution. But we're family, she pleaded. We made mistakes, but we brag about you. We tell everyone how smart you are. Doesn't that count for anything? I felt a cold smile touch my lips. I'm glad you brought that up, I said. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the last piece of evidence. I didn't pull out the proud parents' posts. Those were for my own validation. I pulled out something darker. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table, facing them. It was a screenshot of a text message thread from a year ago. It was a conversation between my mother and her sister, my Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah is Olivia coming to the reunion. Diane, no. She's too busy with her fancy life in Seattle. Honestly, she's become so selfish since she got that degree. She thinks she's better than us. She won't even help us with a small loan for the house. It breaks my heart how cold she is. My mother stared at the paper. The color drained from her face until she looked like a corpse. I was just venting, she stammered. I didn't mean it. You called me selfish, I said softly. At the exact same moment you were stealing $5,000 a month from my future, you destroyed my reputation to cover your crime. I leaned in. That is why there is no contact, I said. Because you didn't just steal my money. You stole my name. My father looked at the text message. He looked at the date. He looked at me. And then he broke. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was a wretched, heaving sob that seemed to tear itself out of his chest. He realized, finally, the magnitude of what they had done. They hadn't just burned a bridge, they had burned the land on both sides of the river. "We blamed you," he choked out. "We blamed you for not swimming across the river after we set the bridge on fire. Sign the paper, Mark," I said. He picked up the pen. He signed. He didn't read it. He just signed his name, his hand heavy with defeat. My mother signed next, weeping silently. It was done. Caleb gathered the papers. He checked the signatures. He nodded to me. I stood up. My legs felt steady. The room felt lighter, as if the air pressure had suddenly normalized. "Olivia," my mother whispered, "what do we do now?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had rescheduled my life to fit her narrative. "You pay your debts," I said, "and you learn to live without an audience." I turned to Brielle. "Call me," I said. "When you get that job." Brielle nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I will." I walked toward the door. Caleb was already there, holding it open. "Olivia." My father's voice stopped me one last time. "Did we ever have a chance?" he asked. "If we had gone to the graduation, would it be different?" I paused. I thought about the girl in the cap and gown, scanning the bleachers. I thought about the hope that had died that day. "I didn't come here to win. Dad," I said, not turning around. "I came here to end it. The chance didn't die today. It died in row 12, section B, 5 years ago." I walked out. I walked through the lobby of the venue, past the wedding guests who were nursing hangovers, past the reception desk. I walked out into the cool morning air of Chicago. I took a deep breath. It tasted of lake water and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like oxygen. Pure, uncompromised oxygen. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened my contacts. I found Noah's number. "I'm leaving. Congratulations on the wedding. The truth is out. Take care of yourself." I hit send. Then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned the phone off, completely off. I walked toward my car. The sun was shining on the pavement. I wasn't looking for 3 empty chairs anymore. I wasn't looking for approval. I wasn't looking to be seen. I was just Olivia. And for the first time in my life, the only seat I needed to fill was the driver's seat. And that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that empty graduation hall to this moment of freedom, and I truly appreciate you walking that path with me. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe while relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Maya Revenge Stories, hitting that like button, and smashing the hype button so we can share this journey with even more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and remember, you are enough.